Thanks for having me. Today I'm going to talk about some work going on to forecast river and stream flows with machine learning. I'll just hop right in. So floods result in probably the most lives lost of any natural disaster, weather-related natural disaster that is. Um, Specifically, these large precipitation events also cause a lot of damage in terms of money and in terms of lives. Specifically, I think in 2011 it cost around $8 billion. And in the opposite direction, droughts can cause a lot of problems with farming. So it's very useful to be able to predict, stream and river flows and how basins will behave in general for purposes of, planning responses to floods and droughts, and also warning residents and overall mitigating the damage. So the data sets, so we worked very hard, did actually a ton of data engineering to create one of the largest joined together data sets of hourly precipitation, temperature, and stream flow data from over 9,000 US river gauges around the US. This created over 100 million total rolls of temporal data on stream flows tied together with the relevant precipitation and temperature data. We're also working on adding things like soil data and plan to add snowpack data and possibly other sources of data as well. And we think that not only could this be useful for this specific task, but also for a number of other geological forecasting related problems. Beyond that, there's actually kind of a lot of very interesting machine learning questions we're exploring too on this data set. Specifically, how can you effectively design, deep learning architectures that take, the static data on the river basin, like the longitude, and latitude, the soil depth, et cetera, and combine it with, this dynamic time series data with cubic footage per second, precip in the last hour. We also want to look really if transfer learning is effective. So if we train on, river basins with a lot of rainfall data and then train on ones with a lot of, gauge data dating back many years, but then there's, some, streams without automated gauge data, can we effectively forecast them? Another major question is, how well can these models, work in the face of these out of distribution events, such as, like a 1,000-year flood? Can they still accurately forecast for that? Then finally, just beyond the flow forecasting aspect, we're trying to create a very good open source deep learning frameworks for any type of time series forecasting problem. So, we're working to incorporate, the state of the art deep learning time series models in PyTorch into this general framework, so anyone can come along with any other time series forecasting problem and quickly see, oh, this model works, it doesn't. They can track their hyperparameters well, and they can see, if transfer learning, pre-training on any of our data or other temporal data helps. And they can also easily, join this large data set to their data for, these geological and for, other types of weather or even agricultural forecasting problems. So yeah, I think almost like, I guess, Hugging the time series version of Hugging Face, transformers, what it is for natural language processing. So yeah, that's pretty much all from my presentation. If you're interested, we're looking for, obviously hydrologists, geologists, deep learning experts, data engineers. Basically, if you have a skill that you think could be helpful for this, we're definitely interested in hearing about it. Are there any questions?
Great, and that sounds good. So I have one quick question. So can you discuss just very briefly what's your vision of deploying this stuff in any form?
So deploying it to and actually using it as a tool.
Yep.
So yeah, so definitely that's the end goal, is to essentially get these models that, and ideally it would be just 1 or 2 deep learning models that would essentially take, that static data, which is the gauge attribute, on the gauge, the latitude, longitude, pass it in with that river's temporal data and output a set of predictions for, usually about 2 weeks in advance of what the river flow will be for that particular river. And then, you'd feed in each, river across the country, and we could have a lot of very good real-time, hourly updated river flow forecasts for potentially all 9,000 gauges, though in reality that probably wouldn't be, since there's a lot of problems with some of the gauge data, as we've discovered, but that's kind of the vision. And that would be deployed, on the cloud on GCP, and then, put up on a dashboard or something.